place of worship. I prayed within its chambers and meditated among its gardens. I was happy then, at peace. I remember too the day the orcs came. A day marked by cries of war and torrents of blood. When terrified women and children huddled in darkened corners. I led many to safety, but many more paid the ultimate price. That day, my beloved sanctuary became the Black Temple. There, the orc warlocks practiced a twisted magic that corrupted the land and nearly destroyed us all.
Do not do this, Gul'dan. Bear witness to the undeniable power of our Dark Master. He will destroy us all.
Even after the Horde's reckless sorcery tore the planet apart, my people were unable to find a lasting sanctuary. I remember the armies of demons that swept down on us like a plague. During these dark times, the one called Megtheridon made the temple his home. Then came Illidan, the one they call the Betrayer, the enemy of my enemy.
Megtheridon lures scores of hapless demons through them daily.
Then we must seal them permanently.
We helped him seal the portals of Outland and cut off the Legion's reinforcements. We fought with renewed strength, and together we reclaimed our sacred ground. I think part of me knew, even then, that the Black Temple had only traded one evil master for another. I prefer to remember the temple as it used to be, not the abomination it has become. My soul bears the burden of my misjudgment, but I have been patient. I have been waiting, and when the time is right, the betrayer will become the betrayed.
Poor Akama. If only he had known. If only he had known that Illidan fully intended to actually give him back the Black Temple. Or the Temple of Kerebor. He just needed to be even a bit patient for a bit longer. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Black Temple. I know I've already done a video on this, but I did not like how that one turned out. For one thing, I didn't get to show you that awesome trailer that I just showed you. Plus, let's just say that I have now much more experience going through this place since the last time we did this. And basically what I mean is, just to show it off, right there. I finally, since the last time we were here, I acquired both of the Warglaves on my Night Elf Demon Hunter. They actually dropped for, both of them dropped for him. And then I was able to go through here in time walking, and we beat Illidan then to be able to unlock them as transmogs, which I use on both of my Demon Hunters all the time, because of course I do. So, anyways, another good reason is because they had time walking added to this. They actually added a bit more extra stuff here. Now, there's no lore text here. They still didn't bother to add any lore, but I've done some research to try and add a bit more just off the top of my head here on some of these bosses. However, I can be able to now actually go through and describe the fights for some of them. Like, for example, I can't show off the Teron Gor Fiend fight, soloing that. It just doesn't work that way. But I can at least kind of go through and describe what this fight was like. Same thing with at least one of the phases of the Reliquary of Souls, which is the enslaved, well, actually not that one. It was, I think it was this phase right here. You can't really solo this one, I think. Like, there was, like, a reason to, like, you couldn't do that, so. Anyway, I've also, since then, I have also, listened to the audiobook of the Illidan book. So, there's stuff about what was actually going on behind the scenes for some of this stuff, as well as throughout all of Burning Crusade, that happened, that one of the things I loved about that book is that it focused very heavily, of course, on not just Illidan, but also on Akama and Maiev. The stuff with Akama is awesome. Great stuff. And it's just so sad that even in the first chapter of the book, where it focuses on the portion in Frozen Throne, where they are here together trying to take down Magtheridon, that Akama, he was so eager to get his beloved temple back, his holy ground, his sacred ground, as he should, as you saw in that trailer. That's how he fondly remembers this place. He wanted this place back. He hated that this place had been corrupted and tainted so much by the demons in Magtheridon, and he wanted it back so badly. And he thought Illidan was immediately going to give it back to him. But what he didn't know was that Illidan fully intended to give it back to him, even though, he thought Illidan was just kind of like brushing him off, and he was like, oh yes, I fully intend to give it back to you. Illidan wanted to use this place as a base of operations for his war against the Burning Legion. And what we are basically doing here, at the time we thought, we have to stop Illidan, he's gone nuts, he's gone crazy, he's going to attack Shattrath and take over Outland, and he's a villain. When the reality in the book says that he was actually preparing for an invasion of Argus. And Kil'jaeden had basically pulled off some manipulation to kind of make us think Illidan was going against us, when in reality, Illidan was doing all this stuff and prepping and gathering these forces, making demon hunters. Some of these forces that we have been encountering throughout this place and that we're going to be encountering in this raid was part of his plan to get to Argus and defeat the Legion. That was his overall plan. That's why when you make a demon hunter, and when we're going through this raid fighting Supremus, or getting ready to fight Supremus, you see the cutscene, he's looking down, and I'll even try to voice what Illidan says in that cutscene as we go through here. So, anyways, I actually was gonna be sitting here on my Ashes of Alar mount because I have some history. I have a story about that. But the thing is, if I was to sit here and talk, Ashes of Alar would just be flap, flap, flap. Like the flapping sounds of its wings are loud. What I really wish I could do is if I had, the quest line underway, where you go talk to Adal in Shattrath, and you come here, and you have the cutscene with Akama and Maiev, and we're like, it's time, let's go into the Black Temple! And we're trying to get inside, and, yeah. But unfortunately, I'm not able to do that, So, but for those of you who perhaps don't know the quest line, let me try and kind of do a bit of a summary here. So, there's a portion, and this has gone over in the book, where Akama and Maiev are sort of working together, but Maiev is far too eager and impatient, whereas Akama's like, no, we have to be patient. I like Akama, partly because he shares a lot of, he's an extremely patient individual, which I relate to, because I myself am naturally a very patient person. So, when he talks about how I have been patient, I have been waiting, I'm like, I like that. I can just totally relate to that. He's, and in the book, he emphasizes this, where he's talking about how there has to be a right place and a right time for this. Because remember, Illidan has his soul being watched over by other Ashtong who are more loyal to Illidan than Akama. There's 3 different types of Ashtong here. I'll go over this more when we get inside the raid. But we basically are doing things to lead up to this invasion here, getting things like we had to go. Part of the design of this questline was we had to go do raids. We had to go free Olum from the Serpent Shrine Cavern raid because he was being captured, being held prisoner there under Lady Vosh. Then we had to. He was willing to sacrifice his life, because he knew that Illidan would find out the truth from him. So he was willing to die to prevent that from happening. And then Akama pulls off a deception of Illidan by telling him the truth about Kael'thas. And so Illidan says, you have to have your Ashtong go take out the Phoenix Alar. So we go there, the players, wearing the disguise. Akama sends us wearing the disguise of an Ashtong to go kill Alar. And we can also be able to, defeat Kael'thas in there. Then Akama sends us to the battle for Mount Hyjal, because we have to get a phylactery from Rage Winterchill in this awful raid. And then we come back and he's like, all right, the time has come. And so then we, get the forces from Shatrath and the Naru to be able to lead in here. Maiev disappears in the midst of that, and he's like, well, there's no going back now, because Akama's trying to play this so close. What he's doing is brilliant, but also extremely dangerous. He's playing a game of chicken, basically, because he knows if he makes any mistake, Illidan could destroy his soul, because it's still being held prisoner. So he has to play this perfectly, otherwise it's a disaster. And once Maiev disappears, he's like, well, there's no turning back now. We have to go. We have to get in there. Now, of course, we can't storm the gates, because Illidan will see that, and be able, just kind of wreck that. Now, at the time, we thought, oh, he would destroy that because he's totally a villain. When the reality is, right now, Illidan is prepping his demon hunters that he's been making this whole time from the blood of Magtheridon to be able to send them to Mar Doom, which is, when we first create a demon hunter in Legion. But I'll get to that when we get to the area where Supremus is. By the way, speaking of which, this is kind of like one of the funny things about the difference between how it looks on the outside here, because this is the area where we fight Supremus, and it's much smaller out here, compared to when we get inside the instance, and it's much larger. Yeah. You can even see the doors here are closed, whereas inside the raid, the doors are open, Supremus is standing there, there's a whole bunch of trash around here. Yeah. So, anyways, what do you guys say we head on inside to the Black Temple? And of course we have to sneakily go through here in the sewers. Now if you're wondering, Neeks, why are you doing this on your mage? It's kind of like for cosmetic reasons, I guess you could say. So there is a set here that you can get for the mage, right here, the Tempest Regalia Set. This is actually a pretty well-known set. This is even a skin that you can have Jaina wear in Heroes of the Storm. Now, you can actually get it in the Tomb of Sargeras in Legion, because the normal is basically the same set, except, I'll even do a quick little boom to show you. See? Almost identical. Just a little bit more detail on it, though. With the... what I love about it is the surging of electrical power. That's a green one. That's the heroic one. And then here's the mythic one. Let's just say I would want to get these sets for my mage. But I wouldn't mind collecting some pieces here. There's also some other cloth pieces I haven't collected here because, well, let's just say I ran this place many times on multiple characters, but only certain classes. Let me explain. Hold on. I gotta change the filter. These babies right here, the Warglaves of Azeroth. So there's only 5 classes. Keep in mind, back in Burning Crusade, it was just 2. But now, with the addition of the Death Knights, the Monks, and the Demon Hunters, there's 5 classes that can be able to collect these Warglaves. The Warrior, the Rogue, the Death Knight, the Monk, and the Demon Hunter. You must run this raid with one of these 5 classes if you want to collect these Warglaives. If you don't, if the offhand drops, the main hand is not a big deal. Many classes, there's numerous classes that can wield a one-handed sword in their main hand. But it's the offhand that requires these 5 classes. So needless to say, I hardly ever ran this raid with any of the other classes other than, I have one warrior in terms of max level characters. This doesn't count with my low level alts that I would eventually run this with if I hadn't gotten these. I have one warrior, one rogue, 2 death knights, 1 monk, and 2 demon hunters. Those characters are the ones I kept coming back here for over and over and over. So there's a number of things I haven't collected here because I didn't run it with any of those classes because I didn't want to risk the Warglaives dropping for a class that couldn't pick them up. Now that I have them, it doesn't matter. Now, there was also some other things I really wanted to get here that took a long time. I got the dagger while I was here. I, of course, have the Bulwark of Azeroth, the best shield in the entire game. You guys know what I'm talking about. I, of course, have the Cursed Vision of Sargeras. Very nice headpiece there. I love that piece for the warrior. And I finally got the Black Bow of the Betrayer. This took longer to get than the Warglaives. Seriously. I started bringing my hunter here so I could try and get this bow after I got both Warglaives. And I finally got it recently, so... But, in terms of stuff that a mage can get in this raid, obviously, I have all the pets here. Of course I do. Let's see, what else is there to get? There are some here. There's this wand. There's that Cowl of Benevolence. I have the Cowl of the Illidari. I do have that. This shoulder piece here. I believe that's for the Warlock. So... there is the Robe of the Shadow Council. This keeps dropping off Teron Gor Fiend, and I could never pick it up. So that's partly why I'm here. Just for Mog reasons, basically. However, the story I mentioned is that basically the day that I finally got the Ashes of Alar for this character, I was basically making runs for both the Warglaives and the Ashes of Alar back then. And I went through here, and I had one of the Warglaives drop. And about an hour and a half later, the Ashes of Alar dropped. Yeah. Why is this loading screen taking so long? It usually does not take this long. What is going on here? Okay, there we go. It took a moment there. Anyways, so let's just say I have a bit of kind of like a personal fond memory of that are connected to both this raid and, of course, Tempest Keep, getting both the main hand, my first Warglaive to drop, along with Ashes of Alar on the same day, just an hour and a half apart. 247 times I tried for this raid. So here's a loom. This is the Ash Tongue that I mentioned, sacrificed his own life to try and prevent Illidan from finding out the plan that Akama was working on to try and help us defeat Illidan and take him down and get the Black Temple back. My brethren here were here not long ago. My connection to them has grown tenuous. A powerful presence in the courtyard guards the way forward. So he's basically... this is apparently... I'm neutral with the... So you're going to get rep with the Ash Tongue Deathsworn while you're here. I, of course, got exalted with a couple characters on this because of the amount of times I ran this place with those characters. So you'll probably see me get the achievement for doing this raid for the first time with this class. Yeah, he's basically warning us about Supremus. He's also, as I showed in the previous video, when I died to Illidan, he's how you can quickly get back up to the top to face Illidan. So of course, we're going through the sewers with a number of the Naga forces. So this has, kind of carries through with what we have been doing during our time in Burning Crusade, which is basically thwarting a number of the forces that have been working alongside Illidan throughout the Burning Crusade. Now, some were kind of doing their own thing. Like the Council, for example, that we'll be facing later on. They were focused on running things in Outland, and all that. Illidan didn't care about that. Because his main goal from the beginning, and as I said, this is talked about in the book, if you really want some really good insight into what was really going on here in Burning Crusade involving Illidan and all this, I highly encourage checking out the Illidan book. Whether you read it or whether you listen to the audiobook, doesn't matter. I really enjoyed the audiobook. So, partly being, the one who narrates it does a really good job. It was written by William King. I don't know if that, says anything to any of you, so.
I need to get closer.
So this is High Warlord. His name's been cut off there. Nagentis. So he's basically one of the Naga lords here. You could say he actually rivals Lady Vosh in terms of power amongst the Naga forces here. So the fight here is that he periodically skewers players with his impaling spine, stunning them until they are freed by allies. Over the course of the encounter, Nagentis will cast Tidal Shield, becoming immune to damage and restoring health over time until a player hurls a spine back at him in order to pierce the bubble. So, I mentioned that I participated in Time Walking Black Temple. That's sort of true, but also sort of not. Sorry. I timed that over, during the thing there. I said that's sort of true, but also sort of not. So the thing is, I tried going through here when I was trying to unlock the Warglaives as transmogs. I ended up with a group that had already beaten this boss and were trying to take on Supremus. They couldn't, and everybody left. So then I found a group that somehow had pulled off some kind of skip to go straight to Illidan. I don't know how. I don't know how they were able to pull it off. Don't ask me how or why. I don't know how they did it. Apparently there's a skip that can be done, including with Demon Hunters. I don't know. Anyways, I didn't care. All that mattered to me was that I was, because I was just wanting to get Illidan. Don't get me wrong. I did want to experience the actual raid in its whole, because I do like this raid, and to actually experience it legit. But I was very eager to unlock those Warglaives, so I just joined just to fight Illidan and did the whole Illidan fight. So I have very, personal knowledge when it comes to that Illidan fight, because I actually got to participate in it for real in Time Walking. I'm sure some of you may not count that, for those of you who are purists, or like the only legit way was back in BC. Obviously, that's not really something you can really do anymore. So time walking is the next closest thing that we can do. So anyways. So I've been part of a group a couple times trying to take down Supremus, and some people just can't be able to beat Supremus here. Now look at the amount of trash here. So in preparation for this, you had to go through here. Also note the different kinds of forces are here, like the Dragon Maw and the Netherwing Drakes. This is what I'm talking about in terms of how many of the places and the trash here are emphasizing some of the different forces that were working for Illidan and such during this time period and in this expansion. Like these Illidari Fearbringers here, which are basically demons. Again, this is part of the mistaken writing that the writers were making, mistakenly writing Illidan as if they thought he was killed Jaden. Now, I should clarify, for those of you who haven't heard me talk about this before, there were two different writing teams. One writing team consisted of the top writers that Blizz had, which, of course, featured Chris Metzen. At the time that the writing for Burning Crusade was happening, that group, including Metzen, the top writers, they were actually working on the stuff for Encourage, back in Vanilla. The other team of writers, who apparently had no knowledge of what they were writing about. They hadn't played the games, they didn't know what they were actually writing about or who the characters were. They started writing the stuff for Burning Crusade. You can kind of see the problem here. So they started writing Burning Crusade, and they wrote a good chunk of it, and they wrote it thinking Illidan was killed Jaden. That he was a demon lord of the Burning Legion. So by the time Metzen and the actual, like, good top writers joined them and they found out what they were doing, it was far too late for them to fix what had happened in terms of redoing the whole thing properly. They were cut, they were short on time. So in order to try and fix this, they had to make some changes to stuff like Kael'thas. The whole thing with Kael'thas betraying Illidan to kill Jaden happened to try and somewhat fix what the writers had done mistakenly involving writing Illidan wrong. So, yeah. That's why you'll see, like, these guys here. Or inside you'll see, basically, Natharazim inside. So, this is Supremus. He is one of the largest bosses ever. Look how large he is. His foot is as big as me. So this guy is, he's kind of a DPS check and hits like a truck. He cycles between striking a primary target while creating rivers of fell flame and fixating on random players while littering the area with volcanic geysers. So yeah, fixate. This is one of those mechanics where it is quite painful and annoying to deal with, because if he fixates on you, all you can do is run. Otherwise, you are dead. Basically. So you had to avoid all the flame on the ground. I actually participated in this fight, so I remember what that was like, and yeah, he has quite a bit of health, and you had to make sure that your tank was doing active mitigation to reduce the damage, because it hit hard. It hit hard. Man. So, it's very simple, but yeah. Like, if you had an undergeared group, you were gonna have a difficult time with this fight. Alright. The Waste Rep of Infinity. This is the character that I did all those attempts in Tempest Keep to get this mount for. I wanted this mount to be his primary mount. I mean, for goodness sakes, I've basically built him as Kael'thas. And then, of course, the Switchright Hawkstrider took forever to get as well. So, this is what I was talking about. You see this is like, oh, the Illidari, and it's like basically members of the Burning Legion there. So, yeah. Also, note some of the Ashtongue that are here that are hostile to us. And that's because there are 3 different types of Ashtongue in here. There are the ones who are vehemently loyal to Akama and the cause to secretly overthrow Illidan. Then there are the Ashtongue who think they are being loyal to Akama and are kind of still continuing to play the ruse of being loyal to Illidan when they're actually loyal to Akama, but they are having to pretend to be hostile to us until they know otherwise. Then there are the Ashtongue who are just against us and are loyal to Illidan, not loyal to Akama. They don't care about the cause. They are fully on board with Illidan and against Akama and such. So that's why these guys are hostile to us for now. But once we defeat the next boss, they will become friendly to us. So, yeah. And you'll see that in just a bit here. So, that is Akama's soul. And then here's Akama. So, yeah. Right up until this point, Akama has been having to play a very dangerous game, because if anything was to go wrong, and the whole cause and everything was discovered, they could just destroy it, which would basically kill Akama. So, the objective of the encounter is to assist Akama in defeating the Shade of Akama. Defeat Ashtongue channelers and sorcerers to allow the Shade of Akama to reach Akama, starting Stage 2. Once Stage 2 begins, defeat the Shade of Akama to win the encounter before Akama is slain. So, you basically have to just take care of ads, to try and let him start reaching Akama. So, you have to defeat the Shade to end the encounter. Akama has Destructive Poison, which poisons the target, increases the damage taken. Strikes an enemy with Lightning Bolt that arcs to another nearby enemy. The spell affects up to 5 targets. Yeah. So in order to start this, you have to talk to Akama, because he's right. Because once he gets his soul back, it's like, okay, there's no turning back from this point on.
Illidan's grasp over my tribe is strong. It shall be over soon, one way or another. Are you ready? My people's future depends on us.
I am with you, Akama. So now we have to start taking out the trash in here. Even if we don't, the moment Akama starts working on trying to do this, we basically aggro all of them in here, because now they're like, hey, stop that! So now we have to come over here and get rid of these channelers, because this thing won't move. Once we take out these, then it's going to start moving towards Akama. So they're desperately trying to keep it, like, you know, here, because they don't want Akama to get back. These are the ones who are still loyal to Illidan. There we go. Now it's moving much faster towards Akama.
Kilabs. West.
And of course, we have to keep track of Akama's health. Because if Akama dies, well, it's over. So now that we have defeated it, Akama can get his soul back. And now he can be able to basically let them know it's okay, we're good now. So he absorbs his soul back into his body.
Broken of the Ashtung tribe, your leader speaks.
So they all come out of the shadows.
The betrayer no longer holds sway over us. His dark magic over the Ashtung soul has been destroyed. Come out from the shadows. I have returned to lead you against our true enemy. Shed your chains and raise your weapons against your Illidari masters.
Hail our leader! Hail Akama! So now they know they don't have to keep pretending to be loyal to the Illidari and Illidan anymore. By the way, I forgot to mention, I just realized I forgot to mention, while we were out there getting ready to fight Supremus, clearing all the trash, Illidan was, in fact, let me just head back out there just to kind of help reenact what's going on here. Because at the time, we didn't, you know, when Burning Crusade was out, we didn't know that that's what was going on here. But when Legion came out, and like I said, when the Illidan book came out, then we found out more. And when you make a Demon Hunter in this game, you'll actually see the cutscene that I'm talking about right now. So as we are out here fighting all this trash out here, getting ready to fight Supremus, as well as fighting Supremus, Illidan is right up there. Not just Illidan, but all of our Demon Hunter characters he's right up there.
Illidari, my demon hunters. With countless worlds burning in the Legion's wake, you answered the call. Yet these mortals in their foolishness have come to stop their only salvation. Our time is short. I will deal with these intruders. You must venture to Mardum and retrieve the Sargerite keystone. Now go, but remember, should you fail, all worlds will burn.
And then our Demon Hunter characters go to Mardoom to try and get the Sargeras Keystone, which is the starting zone for your Demon Hunter. At least for now, until Shadowlands, because apparently they're going to change that. Though I really hope they still let that be an option, because that's a really cool starting zone. So you'll see here, as I pointed out, these Ashtung are now no longer hostile to us. They are now, basically, they are friendly. It does show them as yellow, but that's because this character doesn't have too much rep with the Ashtung Deathsworn. Once I get more rep, then they'll be green friendly. So, and that's one of the reasons that you wanted to do that. And I'll show you that in a bit after we go up here and deal with somebody else. So, the next one is someone that we actually accidentally freed during the questing in Shadowmoon Valley. So, in Shadowmoon Valley, there was a quest line that involved encountering somebody by the name of Teron Gor Fiend. Teron Gor Fiend is basically a carryover from what happened back in, like, Warcraft 2? Basically, like, the lore involving the first Death Knights. Not the Death Knights that we play. Those are different. The original Death Knights were odd creations that were made by the Shadow Council and Gul'dan and those orcs and such. And that's what Teron Gor Fiend basically is part of, you know, that he basically is. The Death Knights that we play have nothing to do with with this. Those are based off the new type of Death Knight that was made back in Warcraft 3 when Arthas was turned into a Death Knight by the Lich King and Frostmourne, basically. That's the Death Knight that we play here in WoW.
I need a target.
So, you know, we get through here. I should mention that you'll notice that there's a bunch of fell orcs here. Remember, as we were going through places like Hellfire Peninsula, the fell orcs were basically part of the forces that the Illidari were making. Now, as I should remind you that some of these forces Illidan was making and counting on for his invasion of Argus to defeat the Legion. Oh.
You know, for me, the wheel of death has spun many times. So much time has passed. I have a lot of catching up to do.
So I should also point out before we talk about this. This is Teron Gor and Warlords. Teron Gor. Not Teron Gor Fiend. Teron Gor. So, the one here it says, working alongside the Sargeras, Gul'dan's agent Teron Gor plots to feast upon the bounty of souls contained within the barriers of the holy mausoleum of Akundon. I hope I don't remember how to pronounce that. Obviously different compared to the one that we encounter here. Teron Gor Fiend, and yeah, you know, we accidentally free him basically without really realizing what we were doing as player characters. And when we go turn it in as alliance to the Draenei, and we tell them that who we accidentally freed, they're like, "You did what? Fool! You must have destroy him as soon as possible." Yeah, freeing him was a boo-boo on our part. So Teron Gor Fiend periodically marks a player with Shadow of Death, which kills them instantly. However, this is actually part of the fight. The slain player then returns as a vengeful spirit, with the unique ability to hinder and destroy shadowy constructs that will otherwise decimate players. This was basically one of the first vehicle fights, where you get a separate HUD as if you're in a vehicle, and you get like a few different new buttons and such. This is very commonplace now, but back then, this was like, for some people. Some people just could not figure out how to do this. You know, how to actually be able to properly control being the vengeful spirit and such. So, this is kind of like what I'm talking about here. So, you're the vengeful spirit, and you have these different abilities here to try and fight off these things. They're immune to all damage from players in the corporeal world. They do all these things and just can absolutely wipe the raid. So, yeah. There were some people that I've heard that they just absolutely could not be able to figure this out. I have not gotten to participate in this in time walking, so I can't speak to it personally what it's like. I can only go by first-hand accounts of it. So, because of this mechanic, I can't show this fight off to you properly. So we're just going to go ahead and kill him. I would love it if he drops the robes of the Shadow Council. Yes! I finally have these robes. These dropped for me so many times when I was running for this. And I was like, ah, because I could never pick it up. And now I finally have them. So yeah, I mentioned the thing with the Fell Orcs and basically our thwarting of their army and forces back in Hellfire Peninsula. Basically doing a couple things. One, getting rid of Magtheridon. Two, basically dealing with some of the dungeons over there, such as the Blood Furnace, for example. You know, places there that were basically became factories to try and create more Fell Orcs. It's worth noting, at least if I recall this correctly in the book, that Illidan wasn't really counting on that at all. That was more so something that, the Illidari Council cared much more about the running of Outland and such. Illidan didn't care about that. He only saw this, place as a base of operations to kind of, work at, while trying to see if he can get his forces, mainly his demon hunters in Illidari, because those were basically the only forces that he trusted, since our demon hunters were the ones he sent to Mardoom to trust with such an important task of getting the Sargerai Keystone. He didn't care about the other forces to trust with that kind of important task. He only cared about our demon hunter characters. That's the forces he really trusted and wanted. So the other ones he didn't really, care about that much. So I like that you can see some of the Ashtung are stealthier. So I mentioned the rep that you can get with the Ashtung Deathsworn. That's because over here you can be able to get regents. And here's the spirit of Udalo, another important Ashtung that we meet in the questing that has to do with Akama and Ulum.
Good price.
So here's the Quartermaster. Let me go ahead and clear up my bags a little bit. Just, So there's stuff here that, you could be able to, if you had tailoring, for example, or leatherworking, blacksmithing, that you needed, because look at the stats. Shadow resistance. A lot of this stuff has shadow resistance. Now you're probably going, what do you need shadow resistance for? There's something here for a mage, Exalted. A trinket. I imagine, so your spell critical strikes have a chance to grant you spell haste for 5 seconds. I'd imagine that would have been a very nice trinket to have back in the day. Let me see other stuff here. Nope, never mind. Really? The mages were the only ones that could get something like that? Huh. But anyways, it mainly has to do with this boss right here. Sure as. I'll get to her in a bit. So, what do you say we go visit the Reliquary of Souls, which is actually kind of important when you find out what was actually going on with that. So, the thing is, Illidan fully intended to carry through on his promise to Kael'thas to try and help provide them a way to kind of deal with their hunger of magic. And that's kind of what he made this out of. Or rather, the intended purpose of making this. And I'll show it to you in a bit. But it's going to be hard. I basically can't really show off the fight. Because, well, it manifests 3 different essences over the course of the encounter. Each applies unique effects that must be handled differently. The Essence of Suffering strikes the nearest player. Afflicts the raid with Aura of Desire. And the Anger one afflicts the raid with Aura of Anger, which generates over time. Yeah, so. Oh yeah, this little area here, this little gauntlet right here of all these soul fragments, this was... Yeah. I actually was with a group that actually went over here and actually participated in this fight. Yeah. It didn't go so well. But I remember thinking, we can't just ignore the trash in this area here, because they're just going to keep coming after us. So, once you get close to this thing, it's going to trigger the boss. So, that's not the thing I'm talking about. The thing I'm talking about is this right here. This is supposed to be basically the source of magical font and power that Illidan was going to give to the Blood Elves to basically be their substitute for the Sunwell to get their magical fix to kind of keep themselves alive, basically. He was fully intending on using this and giving this to them to have them use just to kind of get that fix to, to help themselves out. But then the betrayal from Kael'thas happened. Yeah, well. However, some of the Blood Elves that had found out about this stayed loyal to Illidan instead of Kael'thas and the Burning Legion. So, yeah. Now, it's important to note, you can come back here as a warlock in Mists of Pandaria. I even made a full video on that if you want to see the Greenfire questline. That thing there is not here. This is still here, though. Yeah, this is basically a font of power that has basically stayed here in the Black Temple the whole time, even after Akama and such have taken this temple back. But, yeah. So, let's start the fight.
Pain and suffering are all that await you. I don't want to go back.
Yeah, so he reduces all your healing effects by 100%. Regen effects are reduced. Armor is reduced. Yeah. This was not a fun fight. Considering all those debuffs. Some of the most fun fights are the ones that provide tons of debuffs, aren't they? Yeah. So then we get this intermission where these enslaved souls get released and they try to attack us. They reduce health and mana to targets within a certain radius. Then we get stage 2, the Essence of Desire.
You can have anything you desire for a price. I won't be far.
Look at my blazing barriers basically doing damage to them and basically doing the fight for me. So then we get another intermission. More enslaved souls. Just drop a meteor on their heads. And then we get the Essence of Anger, which deals shadow damage over time, increasing damage dealt. Effects increase over time. Attack speed is increased. Causes players to increase threat generated by 200% for 10 seconds. Every time he drops these shoulder pads for my shaman, and he's never in here to pick them up. Ah! Even when I came in here on my hunter to get that bow from Illidan, he wouldn't drop the shoulder pads for my hunter, so I could at least pick them up on my hunter for my shaman. Ugh!
I'm out of range.
But that's fine. You know why? Because as I mentioned, you can basically get these, the same set from Black Temple, but you can get an upgraded version at the Tomb of Sargeras. The same applies, basically to every class. That if you compare the Black Temple set to the Tomb of Sargeras set, the normal set is the same, and then you can get an upgraded version if you do it on Mythic. So I have those shoulder pads from the Mythic Tomb of Sargeras on my shaman, so I'm not too broken up about it. So look at all these behemoths. all part of this Fel Orc army and forces here that, like I said, Illidan didn't really care about these forces here, not like he cared about making more demon hunters. These were kind of just fodder and grunts and such that you could basically also consider meat shields. At least that's how Illidan basically saw them. So this next boss, this kind of has to do with what we did, as I mentioned, getting rid of the Fel Orc army and supply back in Hellfire Peninsula. So this is Gurtog Bloodboil. So because Magtheridon is no longer a source of power to draw from to make more Fel Orcs, and because we took care of the Blood Furnace and all that, he's basically all that's left to draw from in terms of trying to create more Fel Orcs. He's basically the prototype, and they are trying to kind of replicate him as a prototype. So us coming in here and killing him basically makes it where they can no longer make any more Fel Orcs. So as the fight progresses, Gurtog swaps between two modes that determine which abilities that he uses. In one mode, he afflicts distant targets with deadly maladies, while in the other, he fixates on a random player with his full might. He has abilities such as Blood Boil, which causes the target's blood to boil, dealing damage every second for 24 seconds. He can cause Acidic Wound. The tanks had to be aware of Bewildering Strike, that dealt damage and confused the target for 8 seconds, and Arcing Smash, which lashed out in a vicious arc, inflicting damage, plus to 125 two enemies in a cone in front of the caster. His other stage was Fel Rage, courses through his veins, increasing damage dealt by 85% and gaining stacks of fury, which increase attack speed. So he would not only get to hit like a truck, but he would hit a whole lot faster too. Yeah, you could probably consider this one of those straight-up DPS check fights, while also trying to be aware of those other abilities. So,
Hard will crush you.
let me see if I can actually show some of this. So you can see Acidic Wound, it's stacking. Blood Boil is now on me, which deals damage every second.
Target you.
I have another stack, and you can just see these. Imagine taking this, and all of a sudden you just keep getting all these stacks on you. Then you get Bewildering Strike, which of course confuses you.
Your blood.
Target you.
It's your.
Let me go ahead and pop this. So now that we've defeated all these other bosses, you'll see here it says, the door to the den of mortal delights has opened. I'll comment on this in just a bit. Sometimes I'll do the, I'll take on Blood Boil first and then go do the Reliquary, just so I can make sure I, keep track of which door to go through. Because sometimes I turn the wrong way. I'm like, oh, wait, it's this way. So yeah, there's another Illidari Night Lord, which is basically a Nathrazim, which again shows the confusion that was, going on here, confusing the Illidan's forces with the Burning Legion forces, because, well, how many of you can actually, would actually think that it would make sense that Illidan would have Nathrazim amongst his forces, considering how much he hates the Burning Legion? So this next area, this is the area that made a lot of people go, just kind of raise their eyebrows and were like, whoa. There's a lot of concubines in here, and courtesans in here. There's also some succubi in here as well. And then, of course, because of the next boss, it actually kind of makes sense, because, well, these, these particular types of demons very much, do the whole pleasure thing. So, some people have speculated about why they are here. And I heard someone, come up with a theory. By the way, there used to be a bug here where these succubi would just kind of stand still, after I killed them. So, But basically, the I'm now friendly with them. Nice. The headcanon someone came up with was that courtesans and concubines are not necessarily here just for sex or anything like that. They're basically here to help keep the morale up for the troops and the forces of the Illidari. And I don't mean that as a euphemism when I say keep the morale up. I mean literally, keeping up the morale of your forces and soldiers is actually pretty important because you do not want them to get all, depressed or think there's no hope or that there's no point or any of that. So you try to do things to keep their spirits up. And basically, you could say that these are here not necessarily, for physical skin pleasure, but rather just to provide pleasurable company, to be able to provide someone to talk to be able to, just like keep their spirits up, without having it to be just about, sex or anything. And I'm pretty sure that it wasn't Illidan who basically helped provide all this, but rather the Illidari Council, because the Council, and, even in the book, was like, whereas Illidan was focused on his one agenda and goal of defeating the Burning Legion, the Council had different ideas and thoughts and agendas, and didn't necessarily agree or follow or care about that so much, So this is Mother Sharaz. As we find out in Legion, the relation that Illidan and the Illidari had with some of these forces, such as the Naga, and these right here, especially when we meet one of the other mothers in Legion as one of our followers, as a demon hunter, it's interesting. So she will link allies together with Fatal Attraction, teleports several nearby enemies to a random location, and links them with demonic energy. Fatal Attraction deals shadow damage to nearby allies within 15 yards. It will break when allies move outside of 25 yards of each other. This is why you got the rep up to get the shadow resistance gear for that mechanic in this fight. Yeah. So Fatal Attraction was basically the reason with all that shadow damage that you had to get that gear to counter all this shadow damage that she would deal, including things like Vile Beam. Strikes an enemy inflicting 15,000 shadow damage every 2 seconds for 8 seconds that arcs to another nearby enemy. 19,000 shadow damage. Sinful Beam strikes enemy inflicting 35,000 shadow damage. Yeah, this is why you had to get that gear for this fight.
So, business or pleasure? I'm all yours.
Yeah, need I say more?
I wasn't finished.
Hey, she dropped the shoulders I need. And yeah, she's one of those who actually drops the set pieces that you need. Like that. Boom! I now have the Mantle of the Tempest. I now have a piece of this set. Yay! If you're curious, you can't get all the pieces in this raid. You have to get some of the other pieces from Mount Hyjal. If I ever want that set, I'm going to have to take this character to Mount Hyjal and hope those pieces drop. But I also still need that pet. So, anyway. Whatever. So, we've seen a lot of the grunt forces, basically. The kind of the foot soldiers, like the Fell Orcs, and some of the Naga, and the Ash Tongue, and all these other different forces that were basically the, a good chunk of them were just basically just the, the meat shield foot soldiers and forces and grunts. The elite forces, though, were basically the Illidari and the Blood Elves. A lot of these are here, as the main forces. And that's partly due to set up because of the council that we have coming up here. You can see a lot of Illidari forces here. Mainly Blood Elves. And I point that out only because, as you know, you can make Illidari or Demon Hunters out of both Blood Elves and Night Elves. So I just found that interesting. But remember, Burning Crusade, of course, added the Blood Elves, so of course they got a big focus. So here's the council. There's Varus Dark Shadow, Nethermancer Zerevor, Gathios the Shatterer, and Lady Meland. Again, these characters are in the book, so if you want more insight as to what was going on in terms of the politics involving this council and their basically differing views and such in regards to what Illidan wanted to do along with Akama, highly encourage checking out the book. So, this is of course a council fight. So, Gathios the Shatterer can have one blessing active at a time. Blessing of Protection. If you play a Paladin, you're going to recognize this stuff. Devotion, Aura, Consecration. So he's basically the Paladin in the group. Varus is the Rogue. He has Envenom and Deadly Poison. Zarevor is the Mage. He has Arcane Bolt, Flame Strike, Blizzard. He's basically all three specs of a Mage. So yeah. And he has Dampen Magic and Arcane Explosion. Meland is the Priest. She's got Reflective Shield, Divine Wrath, Empowered Smite, Circle of Healing. Yeah. So, I didn't have to participate in this fight, because as I said, I was in a group that went straight to Illidan, so... But you can even tell by their sets here. He's got the Paladin set, she has the Priest set, he's got the Mage set, and he's got the Rogues. Well, this isn't entirely a Rogue set. That shoulder piece right there kind of looks like it's part of the Warlock set, but anyways. I'm just going to drop a meter on these guys. Yeah. Ooh, nice. Hey, the pants. Alright. So I got a cloth belt, and I got the leggings of the set. Very nice. Nagentus can drop the slippers, so I'll have to come back here for that. And Shade of Akama could have also dropped the binding, so I think the robes and the cowl are going to be the ones that I need to get from Hyjal. And so, after we've taken down the council, it's just one step left, and that's Illidan. So Akama shows up to be able to help us get to him. And of course, he wants to be here for this. By the way, one of the great things about the book was that it went in depth about this entire encounter, about what was going on inside the heads of some of these characters. For Illidan, as he sensed what was going on and how we were on our way towards him, and him sending the demon hunters to Mardoom, because that's in the book, and what was going through the heads and mindset, of course, of both Akama and Maiev during this raid. I thought that was just awesome that basically the stuff that was going on in this raid was in the book. So, really cool stuff. Really encourage you to check that out.
The time has come to face Illidan. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Akama. I just realized I have the music down. I shouldn't. I love the music of this raid. The Black Temple music is wonderful. It's one of my favorite themes ever in this game.
This door is all that stands between us and the betrayer. Stand aside, friends.
So I mentioned the other two Ashtongue that gave their lives as part of this cause. Remember that.
I cannot do this alone.
You are not alone, Akama. Udalo and Olun. Your people will always be with you. Notice the sigil on there is basically his tattoos on his chest. Remember, Illidan is a very powerful sorcerer, or mage, however you want to put it. But he's very strong when it comes to magic. He always has been.
I thank you for your aid, brothers. Our people will be redeemed.
Be wary, friends. The betrayer meditates in the court just beyond.
Oh, it's the music from the cinematic.
You are not prepared.
Forgive me, but I love the cinematic of BC for the music. I love the narration that, and let me just say, I do like the voice actor that they had for Illidan in Warcraft 3, but I love Liam O'Brien and his performance as Illidan in WoW, both in Burning Crusade and in Legion. He has just been awesome as Illidan, in my opinion. I just love his voice acting. Illidan. This makes me sad, but it also, I enjoy this, but it does make me sad. Because I think about how horribly they handled, it's hard for me to actually, give a pass to those writers who, for some... I don't understand the concept of giving people the task of writing about something who have no knowledge of what they're writing about. Having people write about a character like Illidan who don't know anything about his character. And then you have a result like this. So, let me talk about the fight before I talk about the, this situation more. Because I actually participated in this fight. I got my Resto Druid and I healed this fight. Illidan, of course, wields his Warglaives at the start of the encounter. He infects foes with Parasitic Shadow Fiend, which burrows its way through the target, dealing shadow damage every 2 seconds. This is another reason you need that Shadow Resistance gear. When the Shadow Fiend isn't finished, it leaves the target and seeks new prey. Upon reaching 65% health, he takes flight and he throws the Warglaives of Azeroth to the ground, each of which unleashes a flame. The 2 Flames of Azeroth must be defeated to bring Illidan to the ground. For the remainder of the counter, Illidan periodically unleashes the power of the demonic force within him, using those dark powers to assault his foes before returning to his natural form. At 30% health, Maiev will show up and assist in handling the Betrayer's final efforts to overpower his foes. So, very specific mechanics for certain things that you had to deal with. I did this fight as a healer, so my job was to move away from allies that were affected with the Shadow Fiend and quickly help defeat the Flames, but also keep people alive, especially the tanks. So, yeah. So, back in Burning Crusade, there were, of course, 3 classes that were able to tank, because they actually fixed Prot Paladins and Guardian Druids in BC compared to what they were like in Vanilla, where people didn't even want to have them around and only wanted warrior tanks. So both Prot Paladins and Guardian Druids were on the rise in Burning Crusade as tanks, viable tanks. However, this one mechanic here, Shear, it could only be handled by warrior tanks because it needed active mitigation to reduce the damage that you receive, because it would reduce your maximum health by 60% per 7 seconds. Druids and Paladins didn't have something back then that could handle this. Only warrior tanks could back then. So, yeah, healing this fight, especially the tanks and such, was quite fun. Now, here's the stage. I mentioned the Flames of Azeroth. This was the one wipe. I was with a good group. We had only one wipe doing this fight. The one wipe that happened here was we actually let one of the Flames get away from the Warglaive. So the thing is, you have to actually keep the Flames of Azeroth at the blades when they are on the ground, because when they get separated from the blade, they enrage and they deal 500% additional damage, and they increase their movement speed by 200%. So we let one Flame get away, he wiped the raid, because he wrecked us. He was insane. So I told afterwards, I reminded the group, so we have to keep the Flames of Azeroth at the Warglaives if we want to beat them, otherwise they will wipe us. So the 2 tanks we had then properly tanked them at the glaives, and we were basically able to win the fight afterwards. Because then we beat the Flames, he comes back down, goes back to normal. I don't think he ever actually did the demon form mechanic by the time we were able to get him down to 30% health. And then basically, Maiev shows up and helped with the Shadow Trap in order for us to finish off, and then we beat him. So that's the fight. Really fun fight. I really enjoyed that fight. So now I gotta talk about this situation here. So, Illidan, as I mentioned, and they tried to help establish this in Legion, he has already sent the Demon Hunters through a portal to Mardoom to get the Sargeras Keystone, and he has decided to just sit here and wait. And it's important to note, opening that portal actually ended up draining some of his power. It weakened him. So he has basically been here in a weakened state, trying to basically meditate and get some of his power back, knowing that we are on our way here to stop him. We at the time didn't know this is what he was doing. This was all part of his plan to try and get to Argus and defeat the Burning Legion. But we didn't know that. We were basically tricked by Killed Jaden and such into, misperceiving and misbelieving what was actually going on here. But he just never really bothers, because he doesn't think we're going to understand or care, because the Night Elves didn't. He tried to tell the Night Elves about all this, and they didn't care or didn't listen, because he was the betrayer. So he basically just gave up at that point in explaining any of his actions to anyone, because he didn't think anyone would even bother listening. So, by the way, I don't think that's the actual skull of Gul'dan. I think that's just a skull of an orc that he just wanted to look at, just to kind of like reminisce on what if. What if I had not? What if? But at the same time, he also has the memories of Gul'dan from back then, so sometimes he couldn't help but think about stuff like this. But also, I will say, this also plays into something about his character. You remember how we were down there taking on the council? Illidan's up here. This plays into two things. That's actually true to his character. This is actually something they got right about this with his character compared to all the other stuff they got wrong with his character in this expansion. He doesn't care about the power in terms of being a ruler over all. He just, as he said in Warcraft 3, he doesn't want to be some evil dictator or ruler over everyone. He just wanted the power and the magic. Now, he also wanted to use it for good against the Burning Legion. But he also he got very enraptured by it. I mean, he's a mage. He's actually a very powerful sorcerer. He also learned how to be an arcane mage. We even see this in the Illidan missions in Legion. So it's a very similar feeling to what the Blood Elves had when they lost the Sunwell. They really loved the feeling of the magic and the power that it provided and gave them. And he just loved that feeling and just kind of kept on wanting to, that's why, one of the reasons why he actually absorbed the Skull of Gul'dan. Not just because he wanted to have that power, but he also wanted to use it for good to defeat Tichondrius and such. So, here's another thing that plays into his character. This man was imprisoned for 10,000 years in a prison cell, ignoring how stupid that is. If you had, just in real life, let's say you had been imprisoned for, I don't know, a few decades, like 20 years or 30 years. You had been stuck in like solitary confinement for that long. Would you not want to just come up here and sit on the roof above an open sky? By the way, that's Azeroth. Yeah. That actually shouldn't be there. Because remember, we're in the Twisting Nether. Outland is not even really a planet anymore. And it's just kind of floating through the Twisting Nether, basically. So we really shouldn't be seeing Azeroth. But it is a cool sight. You can even see the Maelstrom. It's cool just kind of seeing that. It kind of reminds me of when we go to Argus and we see the skybox of Azeroth when we go there. However, it sort of makes sense in this regard. Azeroth is a huge font of magical power. See, you can see there's the Maelstrom there. So, of course, you could actually be able to see it through the Twisting Nether because of how much magical power and fonts of magical power that there are on Azeroth. So, it saddens me to have to fight him here. But I also like that the dialogue that is exchanged here is in the book. The book made this encounter pretty cool, especially when you find out about their inner thoughts, like Illidan's thoughts when he hears Maev's voice. We're ready to face Illidan, Akama. Doing this quest in Legion as Illidan was awesome. It's one of my favorite quests ever.
Akama, your duplicity is hardly surprising. I should have slaughtered you and your malformed brethren long ago.
We've come to end your reign, Illidan. My people and all of Outland shall be free.
Boldly said, but I remain unconvinced.
5,
Time
4,
has come.
3,
The moment
2,
is at hand.
1.
You are not prepared.
So he's got a 25-minute berserk timer. There's Sheer right there. Sheer is on you, so it decreases your maximum health by 60%. This is why only warriors could handle it back then. If I recall, I'm pretty sure that paladins and druids could handle it now. And I'm sure, you know, when you think about some of the other damage mitigation abilities that other tanks have, like Death Knights or even Demon Hunters, and even probably even Brewmasters, they could probably be able to, you know, use some of their damage mitigation to handle doing that. So yeah, this, you know, he's got the flame crash underneath. Yeah. I'm trying to kind of like show a bit of this fight. Trying to see if there's a way that I can be able to... Alright, let me just kind of... Because if I do one of these abilities, I'm gonna just basically... Okay, that did very little damage. Alright, so here's the next phase, the Flames of Azeroth.
Touched by a rabble such as you. Flames of Azeroth.
There they are. So you had to keep those two right there, right next to the glaives, because if you don't, this is what happens. They enrage and they start hitting like trucks and wiping the raid. Damage is increased by 500%. So you had to take them over here, right next to the glaive, because then they lose their buff, their enrage buff. By the way, Illidan is blasting you with laser blasts while he's up in the air the whole time as well during that phase. So that's not fun to deal with either.
Is this it, mortals? Is this all the fury you can muster?
Their fury pales before mine, Illidan. We have some unsettled business between us.
Maev, how is it even possible?
Ah, my long hunt is finally over. Today, justice will be done.
I was trying to get rid of my barrier so that I could at least show the mechanic that Maiev throws down the trap, but oh well.
You have won, Maiev. But the Huntress is nothing without the hunt. You are nothing without me.
He is right. I feel nothing. I am nothing. Farewell, champions.
The light will bless these dismal halls once again. I swear it.
Yeah. that sequence there where Illidan tells her that, and then she, her thoughts on that in the book are fascinating, because she really does feel like he's telling the truth, that, yep, she felt nothing, no sense of accomplishment, no sense of victory. It was just an empty feeling for her. She really did feel nothing about this. All this time chasing him and pursuing him, and she felt nothing. That stunned her. It really did shock her. And it kind of, well, let's just say some of the things she would do later. Yeah. So. That's the Black Temple raid, everyone. One of my favorite raids. It makes me sad because Illidan is perhaps my favorite character in all of Warcraft. He's probably tied for, alongside Thrall and the Lich King, but I've always been a big Illidan fan, and I always will be. So this always makes me sad whenever I come here and have to beat him. I'm glad he, dropped the Warglaives for me, so I could be able to carry them around on my Demon Hunters as I always carry them, not just because they're the Warglaives of Azeroth on my Demon Hunters, but because it's kind of my way of, showing respect to Illidan on those characters. So, that's one of the reasons I like to collect some of those things, those weapons and such. Because to me, that's like showing my, how much I liked those characters and respected them, so. Illidan wasn't the betrayer. He was the one who was betrayed. Mainly by the writers of BC. But fortunately, they did what they could to redeem him when Legion came around, which made many of us very happy. So, I hope he's enjoying his time just kind of watching over Sargeras at the Pantheon. So. However, this was not the actual finale of Burning Crusade. It would have been. That was kind of the somewhat original intent. Again, the whole thing with the writing in BC was just weird behind the scenes. There was one more thing we had to do, because the real enemy of Burning Crusade was actually Kil'jaeden, especially when we read the book, as I mentioned, that talked about how much Kil'jaeden was actually trying to basically make us think Illidan was the bad guy instead of him. This is also basically where the book ends. The book ends basically where we have beaten Illidan, and then outside, one of the demon hunters that was left over, who is someone we encounter in Legion, he finds out about this. He hears them celebrating outside that Illidan has been defeated. They've taken back the temple. He is ready to actually take down as many of them as he can before he dies, just going down fighting. But then he hears Illidan off, in the spirit world, whisper to him, "You must be prepared." Telling him, you have to get things ready for when the Legion comes back in the Legion expansion. You have to help get things ready for the Demon Hunters and the Illidari and everything else. Get it all set up. But all he says is, you must be prepared. And that's all he needs to hear. I can't remember his name, the character's name. But he's one of the Demon Hunters we encounter in Legion. And with that, he goes into the shadows and vanishes into the night. And that's how the book ends. It's awesome. It's a great ending to the book. A great setup for Legion. Highly, highly encourage you to check out the Illidan book. So when we come back, we will be taking another look, a redo look, just like we did here, at the Sunwell, where we will also be hearing from the words of Kael'thas. Stay tuned.